June 1, 2025. Deep inside Russian territory, a convoy of ordinary cargo trucks rolls through the pre-dawn darkness. To any observer, they appear routine, unremarkable, just another shipment crossing the vast expanse of the Russian Federation. But hidden beneath their wooden cargo containers lies the most audacious military operation of the modern era. In less than 18 hours, these trucks will unleash a coordinated strike spanning 5 time zones, reaching targets over 4,000 kilometers from Ukraine. This is the story of Operation Spiderweb. For months, Russian military commanders had convinced themselves their strategic bombers were untouchable. Bases like Belaya in Siberia, Dyagilevo near Moscow, and Olenya in the Arctic Circle sat hundreds of miles behind the front lines, protected by layers of advanced air defense systems. The S-400 missile complexes created overlapping shields of protection. Panzer point defense systems guarded the final approaches. It was a multi-billion-dollar fortress designed to guarantee absolute safety for Russia's most valuable military assets. But every fortress has a weakness. Every shield has a gap. And Ukrainian intelligence had spent 18 months identifying exactly where that gap existed. The problem wasn't the sophistication of Russian air defenses. The S-400 system could track and destroy fighter jets at ranges exceeding 400 kilometers. It could intercept cruise missiles traveling at 3 times the speed of sound. But these systems were designed for a different kind of war, built to counter high-altitude, high-speed threats approaching from predictable directions. What they weren't designed for was what happened next. At 0347 hours Moscow time, the first truck reached its predetermined position. 3 kilometers from Belaya Air Base in Siberia, the driver pulled onto a service road and killed the engine. To any passing patrol, it looked like a routine overnight stop, a broken-down cargo hauler waiting for morning repairs. But this truck was no ordinary vehicle. Built around a standard KamAZ commercial chassis, it carried a secret that had taken Ukrainian engineers months to perfect. Beneath the wooden roof of its cargo container, 36 attack drones lay dormant in custom-built launch tubes. Each drone was small enough to hold in your hands, weighing just over 3 kilograms. Each carried enough explosive power to cripple a strategic bomber worth $50 million. The operation's genius lay not in the technology, but in the deception. These weren't the large, sophisticated drones that dominated headlines. They were Ukrainian-made OSA quadcopters, cheap enough to manufacture by the hundreds, simple enough to operate remotely, and small enough to slip beneath the detection threshold of Russia's most advanced radar systems. As the Siberian truck took its position, 4 other identical vehicles were doing the same across Russia. One outside Dyagilevo Air Base, home to Tu-95 strategic bombers. Another near Ivanovo-Severny, where Tu-22M3 supersonic strike aircraft waited in hardened shelters. The third approaching Olenya base in the far north. The fourth closing on Ukrainka in the Russian Far East. Each truck had followed a different route, traveling for weeks across Russian territory. They had passed through dozens of checkpoints, been inspected by traffic police, even stopped for routine cargo searches. The wooden containers appeared to contain construction materials, farming equipment, industrial machinery. Nothing suspicious, nothing that would alert the FSB or military intelligence. The drivers themselves were ghosts. Ukrainian operatives who had spent months establishing cover identities, learning Russian dialects, memorizing the routes and procedures that would get them deep into enemy territory without raising alarm. They carried forged documents, legitimate shipping manifests, even backup stories about delayed deliveries and mechanical problems. But the most remarkable aspect wasn't the infiltration. It was what happened next. At exactly 0400 hours, coordinated across 5 time zones, the wooden containers began to open. Hidden hydraulic systems, powered by the truck's electrical systems, lifted the camouflaged roof panels inside. The launch tubes rotated into position, their contents now exposed to the cold morning air. In Ukraine, over 4,000 kilometers away, 117 drone pilots were taking their positions at control stations. Each pilot had trained for months using captured Russian aircraft in Ukrainian museums. They had studied satellite imagery, memorized the layouts of their target bases, identified the most vulnerable points on Tu-22M3 bombers, and Tu-95 strategic aircraft. The drones used no GPS navigation. Russian electronic warfare systems could jam satellite signals, rendering conventional guidance useless. Instead, they relied on dead reckoning navigation and artificial intelligence trained to recognize specific aircraft types and target their most vulnerable components: fuel tanks, engine intakes, cockpit sections. At 04:03 hours, the first drone launched from the truck outside Belaya Air Base. Then another. Within 60 seconds, 36 small aircraft were airborne, their electric motors nearly silent in the pre-dawn calm. They flew low, hugging the terrain, following pre-programmed flight paths that avoided known radar installations and observation posts. Each pilot gripped their control station as the first wave of drones streaked through the darkness toward Belaya Air Base. The feed from drone Alpha 1 showed the Siberian landscape rushing below at 200 meters altitude. Trees, hills, a frozen river reflecting the faint starlight. Then suddenly, the geometric shapes of military infrastructure appeared on the horizon. Concrete runways stretched across the tundra like gray scars. Hardened aircraft shelters dotted the perimeter. And there, parked in neat rows on the tarmac, sat the prize 6 Tu-22M3 backfire bombers, each one capable of launching Kh-22 hypersonic missiles at Ukrainian cities. $50 million of Russian strategic aviation sitting exposed under the open sky. The pilot controlling Alpha 1 felt his pulse quicken. Months of training had led to this moment. He had memorized every angle of the Tu-22M3, studied its vulnerabilities, practiced the precise flight path that would deliver maximum damage. The drone's artificial intelligence had been trained on identical aircraft in Ukrainian museums, learning to recognize fuel tanks, engine intakes, critical structural points. At Belaya, the base's early warning radars swept the sky automatically. The massive arrays were designed to detect incoming cruise missiles at ranges exceeding 300 kilometers. They could track a fighter jet from the moment it crossed the horizon. But the small electric quadcopters flying just above the tree line registered as nothing more than electronic noise. Birds, perhaps. Weather interference. Not worth investigating. The base commander was asleep in his quarters when the first drone reached the perimeter fence. Security cameras captured a brief flash of movement, but the guards monitoring the feeds dismissed it as a technical glitch. The radar screens showed clear skies. The automated defense systems remained silent. Alpha 1 approached its target from the southeast, following a predetermined path that avoided the base's most sensitive areas. The Tu-22M3 bomber sat alone on the northern edge of the tarmac, its swept wings gleaming under the security lights. The pilot adjusted his approach angle, aiming for the fuel tank housed in the aircraft's port wing. Impact came at 04:07 hours. The 3-kilogram warhead detonated precisely where intended, rupturing fuel lines and igniting aviation kerosene in a brilliant orange fireball. The explosion echoed across the silent base, shattering windows in nearby buildings and triggering every alarm system simultaneously. But Alpha 1 was just the beginning. Across 5 time zones, 117 drones found their targets that morning. By dawn, 20 Russian strategic bombers lay in ruins, their twisted metal frames smoking on airfields from Siberia to the Arctic Circle. The trucks that delivered this devastation had already vanished, consumed by their own self-destruct charges, leaving behind only scorched earth and unanswered questions. Operation Spiderweb proved that in modern warfare, distance means nothing when the enemy can hide in plain sight. The age of untouchable strategic rear areas died that June morning, replaced by a new reality where a $2,000 drone can destroy a $50 million bomber. Russia's multi-billion-dollar shield had been shattered by wooden boxes and Ukrainian ingenuity. The fortress walls had crumbled, and there was no going back.